All right. Well, thank you for joining us. I'm really excited today to talk to you about aviation at the University of Waterloo. My name is Dr. Suzanne Kearns. I'm a professor of aviation here at Waterloo. And today we're going to be talking about both the Geography and Aviation and Science and Aviation programs. So I think what's critical to understand with aviation is that for the past 10 years, the industry has had profit, which is incredible because aviation is a very cyclical industry. So we've seen downturns in aviation with the recession in the 1990s, following the 9/11 attacks, with SARS in 2003, and then as well with the 2008 financial crisis. But what's really typical with the industry is that these downturns have a V shape where the downturn is matched very quickly by an economic recovery. So what's critical to understand is that as of January and February of 2020, the aviation industry was projected to double in the coming 15 years. So we're talking about twice as many flights per day, twice as many passengers and cargo carried. And really the most critical challenge was how are we going to find enough young professionals to support that growth in the industry? So we're expecting that young people who are joining the University of Waterloo program have a very bright future ahead of them in this industry, which is expected to continue to grow in the future. And the University of Waterloo overall is a great school. So we've got some amazing statistics about the university, the #1 comprehensive research university for 11 years in a row, the most innovative university in Canada, and the #1 university for student-employer partnerships. And this is really critical because, of course, Waterloo is a very strong co-op program. Our flight program is not eligible for co-op because the co-op program with any degree limits the number of credits you can take off campus that apply towards your degree. And because our pilot students are earning the equivalent of a year's worth of academic credits for their flying, the program is not co-op eligible. But what it does mean is that the university really values and understands working with industry partners. And that's where it's really highly reflected in our aviation program, as we have partnerships with pretty much every aviation company across Canada, and we're really proud of making your education relevant to the industry and to the career that you're working towards. So our aviation program is relatively young. So we were founded in 2007. So in that period of time, we've actually grown tremendously. Our flight program is now the largest university level pilot training program in all of Canada. We take in over 100 students every single year, and that creates a really rich and diverse network. There's a lot of value in an aviation program in the colleagues that you are in class with, because when you graduate and enter the industry, a lot of the time those fellow students will help open doors for you. We also have a really strong and robust student association. So it's the University of Waterloo Aviation Society. And those student society creates all sorts of different opportunities through mentorships, student gala, and a really amazing career day. So I do encourage you to Google the University of Waterloo Aviation Society if you have a chance, and you can see some of their activities. So our pilot programs have 2 entry points. So you can either earn an honors Bachelor of Environmental Studies in Geography and Aviation, or the honors Bachelor of Science in Science and Aviation. In both of those streams, you have to think that the aviation part is the core, and it's completely identical between geography or science, but it's wrapped in either a geography or a science degree, depending on what path you choose. And that really does come down to your own personal interest and drive. If your only desire is to be a professional pilot, then either of those paths won't really change what careers you're eligible for. But if something happens in your future, say, for example, you have a medical problem and you're not able to fly professionally as a pilot, well, your backup career, whether you're in geography or science, will vary depending on the degree that you've chosen. All of those degree programs that are for piloting will earn you a minimum of a commercial multi-engine instrument pilot license when you're finished. And for some students, you can choose to complete what's called an integrated airline transport pilot license, which basically you can think of the commercial pilot license as being the junior professional pilot license, where the ATPL is the senior professional pilot license. So pilots need an ATPL to fly as a captain of an aircraft that requires 2 pilots. So usually you wouldn't require that until later in your career. But there is the option in our program where you could earn, or you can complete the exams for that credential while you're still in school. And they're what they're called frozen, meaning like you put them in the bank and then you go out in the world and you fly. And once you have enough experience, then those exams do apply towards your licensing. And new in September of 2020, we're introducing an aviation specialization as part of our geography degree. So if you're a person who maybe you love aviation, but you don't want to be a pilot, or perhaps you already have flight training beyond a private pilot license, which is more than you can have to enter our pilot stream of our program, then you could enter our geography and environmental management degree and earn an aviation specialization where you can take all of the academic university aviation courses. And this would be a really good choice if you were interested in being an air traffic controller, dispatcher, or perhaps working in airport management. So these ground-based careers are really highly in demand. And what I often will say to students is that for every pilot, you can think there are hundreds or thousands of other professionals who are contributing in order to support that flight activity. And there's some really exciting, really in demand, and really relevant careers that are out there for people who are interested in that pathway. So you would take classes in aviation, sustainability, human factors, aviation safety, as well as your geography-focused classes in things like geomatics, climate change, and remote sensing. So the aviation specialization can be tagged onto either a 3 or 4 year bachelor's degree. It is co-op eligible. So this is if you're wanting to focus on one of those ground-based careers, you could complete a co-op simultaneously. If you've already done some flight training, you can actually apply that for credit towards this degree, up to 1 credit. So if you look at the program structure for the pilot-focused aviation programs, you can see that for both science and aviation and geography and aviation, that there are 6.5 units of aviation credits, and those are completely identical between the 2 streams of the program. I teach the aviation courses at the university, and in my classes, I see a class full of aviation students, and I generally don't know if they are on the science side or the geography side of the program. Likewise, all of the flight training and ground school that you do, you will be completely side by side with both geography and science-focused aviation students. But for the other classes you take at the university, there will be variability between the 2 streams of the program. So you want to explore those and think about which is most aligned with your own personal interests and make a choice based on that. So for your first year in science and aviation, when you start the program in the fall, so in September of each year, you will take AV 100, which I teach. It's a university aviation course, which introduces you to sort of a cross-section of how international aviation works, as well as a geography course, a math elective, and 2 courses in either biology, chemistry, earth, or physics. In winter of each year, which starts in January, you'll start your flight training. So Avia 101, where it says Professional Pilot Program course, these are courses that are taught by our partner, the Waterloo Wellington Flight Center. And these courses do build towards your flight credentials, so your pilot licenses. You'll also continue to take some courses at the university, so English, additional science courses. And then in the spring semester, in our aviation program, from a pilot focus, students are required to stay in the summer. So we call it our spring semester, but it's actually over the summer months. Each spring semester starts with 2 solid weeks of ground school. And then after that, the ground school element is finished and you will do your flight training in an aircraft and an instructor until you have met your benchmarks for that license. The geography and aviation stream is very, very similar. So you can see the aviation elements are exactly the same, but instead of those science-focused courses, you're seeing additional geography courses. So designing maps, environmental applications of data management and statistics, and as well in the winter term, more about your planetary environment and other various courses that are more aligned with geography. But as you can see, again, if you're coming to the university and all you want to do is to become a pilot, you can be completely assured that in either stream that education is identical between the streams, and then you can explore some of the either geography or science-focused courses to help make your choice. So all the flight training in our program is conducted at the local airport. It's about a 25-minute drive from campus, and we do often have students ask, what if I don't have a car? Unfortunately, there is not public busing between the university and the airport, and that does cause challenges for a lot of students. Through the Aviation Student Society, they will group together, and there will be some carpooling, but it will create some challenges getting back and forth between the university and the flight center. So if you do have the ability to bring a car, it will be easier from a transportation perspective. So at the Waterloo Wellington Flight Center is one of the top flight schools in Canada. They have a fleet now of more than 30 aircraft, and students will receive 5 units, which is the equivalent of an entire year's worth of academic credits for your flight training. So basically what this means is for our pilot training students, they will be earning a 4-year degree, but they only take 3 years worth of credits at the university, and the flight training that they are doing will be the equivalent of 1 year's worth of academic credits. This is a good thing for our flight students because flight training is, of course, very expensive, and that is 1 year of university tuition that you don't pay to the university. Of course, you still have a lot of costs associated with the flight training, but it's one small thing we can do to help offset some of those expenses. So your flight training milestones, as I mentioned, when you start your program in first year, the first semester is only academic on campus. And your second semester, starting in January, you will begin flight training at the Waterloo Wellington Flight Center. So you will have both ground school courses taught by flight instructors on campus, and then you will have to go to the airport a few times a week where you will be paired with a flight instructor one-on-one, and you will actually go for your flight training events. So in year 1, you can expect to have your first solo flight. First solo flight means you fly in the aircraft by yourself for the very first time. This is a really big milestone for a lot of pilots. You'll pass your Transport Canada private pilot written exam and eventually earn your private pilot license by the end of your first summer. Now, sometimes we have students joining the program who already have their private pilot license. If you do, that's fantastic. Many of those students, they will be first year at the university, but they will actually start flying in September of their first year. In effect, they start flying with the second year class of the program, and that will apply for credit towards the program. So that's a great thing if you have it already. But if you have any experience beyond a private pilot license, you're not eligible for our aviation program, and I would defer you to consider the aviation specialization instead. Then in the program, traditionally in year 2, you would earn your night rating and your commercial pilot license. In year 3, your multi-engine rating, which allows you to fly an aircraft that has more than one engine, as well as your instrument rating, which gives you the credentials to fly without visual reference to the ground. Basically means you can fly in clouds when you're not able to visually see the ground below you for navigation purposes or to separate you from other aircraft in flight. Pretty much all airline flights fly under instrument conditions or they file IFR. So this is a really critical credential that you need for a career as a professional pilot. And then in year 4, you have the option of completing your Integrated Airline Transport Pilot License, or IATPL. Sometimes this is called a Frozen Airline Transport Pilot License. But like I said, you're only eligible for this if you started the program with no previous flight experience. If you start the program and you already have a private pilot license and you start flying with the second year group in first year, unfortunately, because of the way this is structured, you're not eligible for the Integrated Airline Transport Pilot License. But you do have the option of pursuing a flight instructor rating, which is also optional. So this is actually a really great opportunity, and we've had several students in our program who are 4th year finishing their academic courses, but they earn their flight instructor rating, and they're actually working as a flight instructor in the 4th year of the program, teaching students who are in first year. So it's definitely still a very positive thing and something to consider. So I'm going to show you a few of the devices that are at the Waterloo Wellington Flight Center. This is an image that was taken inside of the flight simulator, and you can see on the second image what it looks like from the outside. So it's a full front section of the cockpit with a wraparound screen. So simulators like this are really critical parts of flight training. Not only can they be operated in any weather conditions, so if it's thunderstorming or heavy storm ice conditions, but they also don't produce any emissions. So there's a lot of advantages, and we're seeing a lot of move towards increasing the amount of simulated flight training versus in-aircraft flight training. And so we do really encourage everybody before they start with our program to attend one of the Waterloo Wellington Flight Center's information sessions. So if you go to their website, wwfc.ca, or you can email the program coordinator, Moaz Tahir, at info@wwfc.ca. So they can give you information about the information sessions. These information sessions are really critical because they dive into all of the specifics about your flight training. It's really important to understand that all of your flight training is done through this partnership agreement between the university and the flight center. So you pay the flight center for your flight training. None of those funds flow to the university at all. It's all done directly to the flight center. So students often have a lot of questions about the cost, about payment schedules, about what happens if I have previous experience, and what supports will I get, and 100 other questions as well. So those flight-specific questions will be answered by attending one of the Flight Center's information sessions, and we do make it a requirement before joining our program that you attend one of those, because there are really two halves of the program, and you need to make sure you're connecting with both. So this slide is one of the more challenging for most people. It's the costs of our program. Our program is one of the most expensive programs at the university because of the flight-related costs. So the actual degree itself is the same as for any other student at the university. So what you're paying in tuition, fees, books, and supplies works out to roughly $8,700 per year times 3 years. Now, it is a 4-year degree. The reason why we say times 3 years is because you are receiving 1 year's worth of academic credits for your flight training, so you're really only paying 3 years of university tuition. But your living expenses, of course, you still have to pay rent and pay for food over those 4 years, so those expenses are about $10,500 a year. Of course, it really depends on your lifestyle. It could be much less or it could be much more, depending on how you live. So what we're looking at is University of Waterloo costs plus living expenses of around $68,000 over the 4 years of the program. And again, that's approximate. Things do vary. But when you look at the cost of the flight training, this is where a degree in aviation is significantly different from a lot of other degrees on campus, because flight training by its nature is very expensive. So the Waterloo Wellington Flight Center training costs on average is around $71,500. Now, again, you pay this per hour to the flight center. So generally what you do is you will give them $1,000 or $2,000 and they will hold it on account. And then when you go flying, they'll deduct the cost of those flights, the actual amount you spend per flight, off your account. And once your account is close to zero, they'll ask you to top it up to add more funds to the account. None of those funds come to the university whatsoever, and it really also does depend on your performance. So if you show up ready to fly, you're ready to go and prepared, you can expedite some of your training, whereas if you are not prepared, you have to repeat lessons over and over again. It is possible that those costs will inflate as well. If you do pursue the integrated ATP, there is an additional $8,500 because there's an additional course involved in that. So that is an option. And some students do choose to pursue the flight instructor rating, which also has a cost to it. Although in previous years, if the flight center is in need of instructors, they will sometimes pay for students' flight instructor ratings in return for that student working for the flight center for a year or two. So overall, the estimated total degree cost, you're looking at around $140,000 or $148,000 if you do choose to pursue the ATP. It's also really critical to understand that There is no student loans available in Ontario for flight training costs. So most people do have to pursue private financing for the flight training part of our degree program, where they might get OSAP loans for the university tuition. The admissions requirements are a little bit different depending on whether you're coming into the program on the science side or the geography side. So we'll talk about science first. So ultimately, you need 6 U or M courses, and you need an average in those courses in the low to mid 80s in order to be admissible to our program. So for the science side, the courses that have to be factored into that average include your English, advanced functions, and calculus and vectors. So you need a minimum of 70 in those 3 courses, and then you need 2 of the following biology, chemistry, earth and space science, physics, and mathematics of data management, plus 1 more course. So what I often advise students who are in high school who are planning their grade 12 year is I say that ultimately the university has an algorithm across the board where the students with the highest average with this combination of courses are the ones who are offered admission into our program. So we don't get to see students until the university has deemed them admissible. So the absolute best thing you can do if you want to optimize your chance of admission into the program is to take the required courses, 2 of the list that you think you can get the best grade in to be as sort of numerically high grade as possible, and 1 additional course. And then ultimately you want to try to shoot for an average that is 85 or higher in those combination of courses, and that will give you a really good chance of admission. If you are an international or out of Ontario student, it is a much more individualized process. So an admissions officer will look specifically at you, at your case, and will make an admissions decision based on that. So this is guidance specifically for Ontario students. For the geography side, you can see it's very similar. So what you want to do is you want to strategically choose your courses so that you can achieve the highest average possible in grade 12. You need a minimum of the English, 1 of advanced functions, calculus, and data management, and other courses so that they combine to 6 classes with the highest average possible. So again, if you can achieve an average of 85 or higher with that combination, it's very likely you will be admissible to the program. So a few quick points. If you are interested in aviation here at Waterloo, we strongly recommend you do the following things. You need to attend an information session at the Waterloo Wellington Flight Centre. Again, you can go to their website, uwaterloo.ca, to review the schedule of when those information sessions will be held. But ultimately, we want to make sure that before you make this choice, you have as much information as possible about how the flight training works, in addition to what's expected from you from the university. You need to pass a Transport Canada medical exam, a Category 1 exam. So every pilot needs to maintain a medical certificate for their pilot license to be valid throughout their entire career. So depending on how old you are, when you're younger, you go once every 2 years, and when you're older, you go every year. But ultimately, you have to demonstrate that you are fit to fly. This is as much a safety issue as anything else, because you can't have pilots who are flying an aircraft by themselves have a high likelihood of potentially passing out or something else happening. So they need to make sure that you are fit to fly. So what we need to do is we need to ensure that before you start down the path of pursuing a career in aviation, you have every confidence that you can get one of these medical certificates. You don't want to be finding out, a week before graduation that you're not eligible for this. So we need everybody to go to a Transport Canada medical examiner and get their Category 1 medical exam. The medical examiner might ask you why you're pursuing a Category 1, because this exam is specifically for professional pilots. And as you're still a student, they might ask you to instead pursue a Category 3 exam. But again, because we want to make sure you're capable of becoming a professional pilot and having a long career, we want everybody to get the Category 1 before they start our program. We also need permanent residents and visa students to take what's called the Aviation Language Proficiency Test. So aviation has the international language of English, which means every international flight on the radio, they speak English. So not only do you speak common English, but we also have what we call aviation phraseology, which is sort of unique words that are specific to the aviation industry. But we need to make sure that you have a good working skill set in English before you start flight training as well. So the ALPT, the Aviation Language Proficiency Test. We're really proud of our industry relationships here at the University of Waterloo. I often tell my students that I don't want to just teach you about the aviation industry, that I want to teach you in partnership with the industry. So in every one of my aviation classes, we will have guest speakers from all facets of the industry come in to speak to us because we really want to make sure what you're learning is relevant and preparing you for your future career. And that reflects in some of the really amazing job opportunities that are available to our graduates. Both the Sunwing Cadet Program, where there are only 3 schools in Canada that have this program, and our graduates will go directly to become a first officer of a 737 aircraft upon graduation. Our JAS Pathway Program, so these students will also go and work directly for JAS. If you have not heard of JAS, they will fly under what's called Air Canada Express. So if you fly on an Air Canada aircraft, but it's generally a smaller aircraft, and it will say operated by JAS, then those are very likely, or they could possibly be students from our program who have graduated. And I see many of my students often when I travel that they will graduate in April or May of each year, and by the fall, I'll see them often in uniform in the airport, which is pretty fun. And Porter, of course, has Destination Porter as well. So these are some really interesting opportunities, but we also have conversations with WestJet, Encore, so there's and other airlines as well. So there's a lot of opportunities, and again, we really do focus on trying to help you get that next step into your career once you've graduated. And our graduates have been very successful at finding employment. So you can see on the slide, there's sort of a wide list of positions where they have achieved employment, from WestJet to JAS to Sunwing, even Cathay Pacific. And I met with a student a few weeks ago who's with Singapore Airlines as well. They literally are all over the world, flying all different types of aircraft. What's really important to understand about the industry right now is that they often say the center of aviation is moving east because the Asian parts of the world, the Asia-Pacific region, is really growing at an exponential rate. So they have a huge demand for pilots. So we're increasingly seeing pilots who were trained in North America go and work overseas. But there's a lot of really exciting opportunities for young people. So this is a picture of our first class who was employed through the Sunwing Cadet Program, which is pretty unique. You know, we're talking about 21 or 22-year-old young people who are flying that large aircraft that they're standing in front of, 737 aircraft as a first officer. This is one of our first graduating classes as well. And so overall, if you have further questions, we do encourage you to reach out to us. So there's a variety of people who are here to answer questions that you have. Dr. Ian McKenzie is the Director of Aviation. Graham Barnes is the Recruitment Coordinator if you're interested in the Geography and Aviation side. Caitlin Derbicker is the Recruitment Coordinator if you're interested in the science side. And if you have questions specific to the Flight Center, so really flying related questions, then Moaz Tahir at the Waterloo Wellington Flight Center is the person to reach out to.